All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are here day after solstice to talk about EQIP Roadmap, explained for small scale farmers. And this webinar is really geared towards growers, our farmers and gardeners across Indiana. We wanted to have an opportunity to really, talk with people directly, increase transparency, increase our communication with our small scale farmers and gardeners. And this is also really just the basics, the nuts and bolts of what EQIP is, share about the application process, share an upcoming deadline, which is fast approaching. Share also practices that have financial incentives through EQIP that go beyond high tunnels for small scale farms. So really want to put that face to the name with folks in our state who are resources for you, and then also create an opportunity to have conversation, questions and answers, and to be able to put this out virtually for our partners and farmers themselves to get connected with us. So with that, our speakers today are Shannon Zizula, who is our NRCS State Resource Conservationist. We have Kara Bergschneider, who is our NRCS State Small Farm Conservationist. Myself, Ellie Blaine, I'm the Indiana Small Farms Director, and that is a new program name for the Urban Soil Health Program. Similar team, smaller team, similar mission and goals and focus, but we'll be supporting direct technical assistance with our customers and also our partners even more so. And then Megan Ayers, our Indiana Small Farms Conservation Southern Small Farm Conservationist. And then this is our agenda for the hour and a half that we'll be together. We really, again, are just focused on the nuts and bolts of EQIP in this time. We do plan to do another meeting that will go into more detail about the conservation planning process, really nitty-gritty, and answering your questions about that contracting in depth, the back and forth that can happen with your local district conservationist and thinking through those practices, details, all of that happens after that initial application. And then just as a heads up, we expect that you have a lot of questions about EQIP. You might have gone through the process on your own farm or garden or supported clients with it. And, it is a complicated program and there's a lot of moving pieces and details. And, your situation may or may not be unique. So please do ask the questions here. That's what it's here for. But if we need to go into more detail about your particular situation, your farm, your contract, please do be in touch with us after, and we'd be happy to take that time to go into more depth at a later time. And then a very important note that NRCS programming is state specific. So we're focused here in Indiana. There are certain program priorities and aspects that are really only applicable to our state. So that's why, when we might Google a practice and see, oh, this is, available in another state and be really excited about it here. There may be nuance to that we have to go into more depth and really look at those state specificities. So again, do ask the questions. This is open platform. We're really excited to get started. We will have time at the end for questions and answer. Put your questions in the chat as we go along as well. Tanvi Ladd, our other coworker with Indiana Small Farms Conservation, is here with us. She'll elevate your question if we have time in the flow of the chat. Otherwise, we'll loop back to it at the end. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shannon Zizula. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ellie, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see everybody join us today to help you better understand our Farm Bill programs that can help you on your small farm. And especially thank you to the team that put this information together. You're going to get a lot of great information today. I'm just here to reiterate that whether you are a small gardener in downtown Indianapolis or you have a small farm out in the countryside, We value what you do for producing food for this nation, and we are here to help you with your conservation needs on your farm. We've invested a lot of efforts into this team, into training, into making sure our programs fit the small scale agriculture that's out there across Indiana. And we're just really excited to present this information to you and see if one of these programs that we have to offer might be of benefit to you. And if it is, then how to get your foot in the door and see how we can help you. So with that, I will turn it back over to get the good information to you. Thanks, team.
Great. Thanks, Shannon. Appreciate that. I'm Kara Berkschneider, the NRCS Small Farm Conservationist, and I am going to start us off with what is EQIP. So EQIP is our main conservation program on how we get conservation on the ground. It stands for the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, and it's funded through the Farm Bill. The purpose of the program is to help agricultural producers like yourself voluntarily choose to put conservation practices on the ground to improve your natural resources. So when we talk about natural resources, we're talking about soil, water, air, plants, animals, humans, energy. So any of those natural resources that have room for improvement on your farm, we may be able to help financially put a conservation practice to address those issues. So I have a lot of small farm friends, and I was a small farmer myself at one point. And so because I have a good relationship with a lot of small farmers, that just quite frankly, people will say, Kara, what is the deal? Like the government is going to pay me money to do cover crops, a conservation practice on the land that I'm growing on. What's the catch? And really, honestly, there is no catch. We as a country have decided that it is important to conserve our natural resources because as a country, we all benefit when we improve our soil, our water, our air, etc. And so by doing these conservation practices, by participating in a program to do these conservation practices, you're really helping all of us. Our air, our water, they don't know land boundaries. And so by improving those natural resources on the land that you're on, you help all of the people downstream and around you. So that's why we have this program. It's really as simple as that. And there isn't a catch as to why we offer it. So a little bit more detail about what EQIP, this financial assistance program, is and what it is not. It's not a grant program. It is an incentive program. So that means that we're incentivizing you to voluntarily put conservation practices on the land so that we can all benefit. It is a cost share program. And what we mean by that is that the government helps share the cost of implementing conservation. The goal of EQIP is to pay for up to 75% of the cost of putting that practice on the ground, and that includes labor. The other 25%, it will come out of pocket, either in dollars or in labor. Our funding is flat rate. It's a flat rate payment. And what that means is that every conservation practice has a designated amount that we will pay per unit. So let's use high tunnels as an example, because a lot of people are familiar with high tunnels. We will pay a certain amount per square foot of high tunnel that you implement, that you build, if you go through EQIP. The payment will come after the practice is implemented. And so we know that that can be a little bit of a hardship. And so if you are a historically underserved producer, then there is the option for an advance payment. Next on that, Ellie, thanks. So this is a link to historically underserved producers, what that means to us. And you can go and check that out and learn a little bit more about advance payments too. So hopefully we have piqued your interest a little bit in the EQIP. And so let's get into more of the details with Megan. She's going to talk about some of the most popular conservation practices on the farm. All right, take it away, Megan.
Thanks so much, Kara. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Ayers, and once again, I am your Southern Indiana small farm conservationist. I have a small farm in Jefferson County, and I've participated in EQIP programs, and so I think I have a unique perspective, much like Kara, in that I work in this agricultural sector, as well as benefiting from some of these EQIP practices through my own farm. So I want to talk just briefly about what we consider sort of the top 10 common small farm practices. And the one that so many growers talk to me about is the high tunnel practice. And in fact, it's how I learned about EQIP. Was I was at a farmer's market and someone said, hey, did you know you can get a grant to put a high tunnel on your property through the federal government? And I said, that can't be true. And I reached out to my district conservationist, shout out to Tim Schwipps, and he came to my farm and we started talking about it. And so the NRCS's most popular conservation practice for small scale producers is indeed the high tunnel practice. This helps producers extend the growing season, as well as improve plant productivity. But there are lots of associated practices that are under our EQIP umbrella that can improve the land, air, and soil quality. And they may be less of an initial investment for our small farmers who might find the investment of a high tunnel as their first EQIP practices to be a little daunting. So some of those associated practices I'm going to talk about right now. So in addition to the high tunnel, we have our low tunnel practice. So this is a great low-cost alternative to season extension and a wonderful way to begin to teach yourself how to successfully manage time and production year-round. Additionally, low tunnels aren't just used for season extension, but they can be used as an insect pressure exclusion or even to protect plants from other elements. So for instance, say, not only frost, but also the sun. You can also utilize components from a variety of sources for our low tunnel practice. It doesn't have to say come from a kit like the high tunnel practice, but instead low tunnels, you can begin to, utilize pieces of equipment that you may already have, like a frost blanket, like a PVC pipe, sandbags. So electrical conduit or a 9-gauge wire. There are even low tunnel kits you can purchase full out. So it's a great low impact financial practice that you can have huge impacts on your farm. The next practice from low tunnels that is a great additional practice is mulching. Mulching is something that many small scale farmers do already. This is a practice that hones efficiency with water conservation. You can utilize mulching as a way to also add soil organic matter to your fields. The thing about mulching, it with EQIP is that we are using organic materials. So we're talking about straw, wood chips in the pathways for our orchards, composting, compost as a mulch, cover crop residue, leaves, lawn clippings, hay. The whole point of the mulching is that we are covering our soil. This is also a great practice to begin to experiment with your EQIP contract. You don't necessarily have to mulch your entire farm if this is something that you are a little hesitant to do. But it's an excellent way to increase soil organic matter and really help those soils. Your next small scale conservation practice would be soil carbon amendment. This is a newer practice scaled for small scale, and soil testing is an integral part of improving your soil's health, resilience, and productivity. And the soil carbon amendment practice can support soil health, resilience, and micronutrient proliferation through the addition of compost or biochar. And like all of these practices, it's really important if you have any questions to reach out to your district conservationist about it, or reach out to your Indiana small farm conservationist as we work in close partnership with our district conservationists. Our next small scale practice is cover cropping. This is a wonderful conservation practice that allows farmers to not only improve their soil health, but also reduce pest pressure in the form of weeds, to increase soil organic matter, to add biodiversity to their crop systems, and even to attract pollinators. Plus, some of our cover crops are really, really beautiful. We also have an excellent tool, the cover crop calculator, so that you can begin to price out how much this might cost you, or even how much cover cropping you would even need to do. Consider utilizing this practice as a trial to expand even into larger cover crop utilization on your farm. You don't necessarily have to only do this practice if you're engaged with EQIP, but you can certainly talk to your Indiana small farm conservationist about maybe trialing some cover crops on your farm as an experiment. So it's a really excellent way to add health to your crops. Our next small farm practice you may be familiar with is tarping. So through EQIP, they will pay for silage tarping. It's a great way to decrease weed pressure and also to reduce tillage by creating a stale seed bed, and to increase your ability to utilize multiple successions throughout the year. It also engages a more complex crop and cover crop rotation and increases soil health. I'd recommend checking out the tarping guide that's available for more information on helpful specifics to utilize this conservation practice. And it's a really excellent transitional tool if you're considering reducing some of your tillage practices. The next practice is reduced tillage. So I know lots of you love to get out in the spring and till, but despite colloquial wisdom, tillage does harm soil health. And any reduction in tillage can help repair soil resiliency to drought, flood, and nutrient loss, while decreasing that erosion potential. So utilizing other conservation practices like tarping and mulching and cover cropping are really excellent ways to transition to a no or reduced till farm plan. And again, this is a practice that's covered through the EQIP program. So as you begin to utilize these conservation practices, you will be getting incentives from the government to put these on your land. Our next small scale practice is wildlife habitat plantings. This is something that you may be doing as well on your own, but it can be in the form of a hedgerow planting or native wildflowers and grasses. Obviously, wildlife habitat plantings have multiple benefits: reduction in erosion, wind screens, an increase in biodiversity. Wildlife habitat obviously, right? An increase in pollination and pollinators, as well as perhaps beneficial insects that we bring into our farms and gardens. And that's going to reduce pest pressure. So again, this is a great conservation practice, and it beautifies your homestead or your farmstead as well. We always love to be out on the farm, and a great way to make it even more enjoyable is to have a beautiful biodiverse planting there. Another great small scale practice is the micro irrigation practice. If you are going to engage in low tunnels and high tunnels, it's really important that you're using water efficiently. Our micro irrigation practice is an excellent companion practice. It's going to save growers time. It's going to save them water. And of course, if we are reducing our water impact, then we're also reducing our erosion impact. And we're using water more efficiently, especially if we're utilizing the mulching practice. So micro irrigation is a great companion practice that goes well with high tunnel practice. In addition to micro irrigation practice, a different practice, but in this very, very similar vein, is irrigation practices. So this is slightly different in that we're not talking just about drip tape, but we're just talking about water management as an integral part of conservation on any farm. So harvesting rainwater from a barn or a high tunnel, utilizing a cistern, irrigation pipelines to water catchment systems is another way that we can utilize our water in a more efficient way. So there are lots of different conservation practices that might address similar issues that you might have on your farm. These resource concerns that your district conservationist and your Indiana small farm conservationist can talk to you about if you are interested in these practices. Finally, there are a lot of conservation practices that we haven't mentioned that have been scaled for smaller production models. So if what I have talked about briefly isn't something you're really thinking about, other options can include what we have listed here: alley cropping, a composting facility, which is just so excellent for anyone who has small scale livestock who's interested in utilizing that nitrogen source from their livestock. Invasive species control. I have yet to be on a farm that doesn't need some invasive species control. So why not utilize this program to start to get a handle on that honeysuckle and that stilt grass, right? Windbreaks are a really excellent way to think about conservation practices as well. Some of these conservation practices, of course, don't have anything to do with production necessarily, but are more so perennial and full farm practices. So you, as a small scale farmer, you can begin to think about bringing in these conservation practices as a way to benefit your whole farm, not just, say, fruit and vegetable production. Other practices include raised beds. This is a great practice when we're talking about compromised soils, especially, say, in urban environments where we're doing urban farms on property that's been reimagined for a small farm. It may be in a soil that has been contaminated. Additionally, soil and source testing is a really great practice. Crop rotation, of course, is integral for any healthy soil, as well as irrigation pipeline if you're looking to get water out to, say, a livestock field. Prescribed grazing, speaking of livestock, is a great practice where we can continue to improve our soils and our forage health by moving those small livestock around, as well as silvopasture, which has been a really great benefit to the health and well-being of our small-scale livestock. Additionally, we've got heavy use pad, hay and forage planting, watering facilities, livestock irrigation, and I think I put in pipeline twice. My bad. Okay, so I'm gonna hit this ball over to Ellie for some additional resources. If she wants to talk quickly about some of these ways in which we can access some of these resources for our small farm partners.
Yeah, just sharing quickly that we have a top 10 small farm conservation practices booklet on our website. There is a resource that lists a lot of them called the conservation practices to consider on small scale farms. Don't have that live linked, but I'll get that out to everybody. NRCS resources for small scale farms is a sheet to a 2-page document with QR codes that take you directly to those cover crop, mulching calculators, and other overview sheets, as well as more in-depth information on cover crops, how to plant, when to plant, termination guides, etc. So a good starting point for familiarizing yourself with some of the technical information of those practices. And then Kara and Megan did a training last year. So it is a little bit old, but I think most of the information is still relevant. There's a recording and slides there about more that go into more depth on some of those small scale practices and resources. And, with that, those are just some starting points. The best resource probably is to contact us and let us become more familiar with your farm, your context, your goals. We're talking to a wide range of folks that may have no experience with EQIP, and others, I'm sure, on this call that have been through EQIP yourselves and have a lot of interest and a lot of needs and a lot of, desire to go even further. So we'd love to go on that journey with you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kara to talk more about eligibility and the application process in depth. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Ellie. Way to go, Megan. That was a lot of information in a small amount of time and really speaks to the immense amount of practices that we've scaled down and now have offer funding for small scale producers. It's pretty dang exciting. So if any of those practices caught your eye, your ear, and you're thinking, I could really use that on my farm to improve water management, soil health, etc., then let's talk a little bit about if you're eligible. Who is eligible for EQIP? And this is really kind of 3 questions that we ask. And the first question is about the producer, is about the individual or entity. First of all, you do have to be an agricultural producer. And what are agricultural products? There's our obvious fruit and veggies. But then it's very wide ranging. It can be flowers, it can be mushrooms, you can be growing trees, you can be growing nuts, medicinals, herbs, livestock. If you are, it is very wide ranging. And so you do have to be an agricultural producer. And as that agricultural producer, you have to meet the adjusted gross income requirements. And that is on average, so it's averaging 3 years, $900,000 a year for your AGI. So a lot of our small farmers have no problem meeting that. But if you do have an AGI over $900,000, then per the Farm Bill, this program, you're not eligible for this program. You also have to, you can also be a private person, so an individual or an entity. So you can be applying as Kara Berkschneider or as an LLC or as a corporation. You can be a nonprofit, but you may not be another government entity. And so as the individual or entity that's applying for funding, we do not fund, this program is not for other government entities. Next, please. Second, we have to meet land eligibility. So the land, we have to develop a conservation plan for that land. And we have to follow if it's highly erodible land, then we have to have a conservation plan that has a tolerable level of soil loss that is planned for that land. You also have to agree to wetland compliance, which means that you're going to protect wetlands that are on the land. The land can be in crop production, it can be a farmstead, it can be forests, pasture, or it can be areas that are associated with agricultural land. A lot of times people will think, well, I have a homestead. Is that eligible? Because it's not, I don't really think of it as cropland. Yes, it is. If you're growing an agricultural product on that land, then the land is eligible. Something that's really important is that the land has to be in production before and during the site visit. So if we think about the intention of this program, which is to improve our natural resources on agricultural land, then we have to have that land into production. So sometimes folks will call us and they'll say, hey, I bought this piece of property and I'm thinking about growing becoming a vegetable farmer. What program do you have eligible for? What program do you have to offer me? Well, that land does need to be in production. You need to start growing those vegetables before you're eligible for EQIP. You also cannot go, our program doesn't help to go from a less intensive land use to a more intensive land use. So the example that we use with that is a garden. So say that you have a garden or you have a vegetable operation, a flower operation, and it's on half an acre. And then you've got a adjacent quarter acre next to that. And that's all in vegetation. It's in permanent vegetation that's not being cropped. And you would like a high tunnel and you don't want to put on the half acre that you're already growing on. You want to put it in that new quarter acre that's adjacent. Well, that would be expanding the production and into an area of less intensive operation into more intensive. And so we do not help expand operations. We help improve your resource concerns on land that's already in production. And that's a really important point. The third tier is resource concerns. So this program is all about improving resource concerns. And so there has to be a resource concern on the land that you're operating. A good example of this is micro irrigation. So Megan touched on this as one of our practices that we offer. If your operation is set with drip tape and wobblers and everything's fine-tuned and working great and you are water efficient and energy efficient, but you want to replace that drip tape or those wobblers, then do you have a resource concern? Are you already as water efficient, as energy efficient as you can be? And if you are able to answer that as yes, you are already efficient, water efficient, and energy as efficient as you can be, then you don't have a resource concern there. If there's room for improvement, then that's where our practices come into play.
Kara, we have a question.
Sure.
Does this mean SWCDs can't apply for EQIP? Soil and water conservation districts, for those of you who might not know.
Any of our program questions, I definitely want to make sure that we answer correctly. So a soil and water conservation district is usually a government entity, and so no, they would not be eligible. You could have, let me give a little bit more of a nuanced answer to that. You could have land, some soil and water districts own land. They own forest land or they own a demo farm. That if you have a private operator who has control of that land, then they could apply for the program, even though it's on government owned land. So it's the producer has to be private. The land does not. It just has to be being farmed by a private person. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so we do have a great document called Mythbusters. Let me see if I can get this in there. And Ellie and team will put a link to that in the chat. And this, some of the misconceptions about EQIP come from older versions of Farm Bill policy that maybe once upon a time, yes, they were true, but now the policy or the law has changed and they're not. So the first big myth to bust is that you have to sell a minimum amount of an agricultural product. Next point on there, please. Thank you. Under our previous Farm Bill, you did have to sell $1,000 worth of agricultural product in order to be eligible for EQIP, and that is no longer the case. In our Farm Bill, in our current Farm Bill, it does say that you can be growing for subsistence. So that is somebody who is not selling at all. They're just growing for their own production, and you are eligible for funding. Second myth is that there is no minimum acreage. So like Shannon mentioned, you can have a backyard garden and be growing on 0.1 acre, or you can have 1,000 acres. There's no minimum requirement for the land that you're growing on. Third, you do not have to own the land, but you do have to have control of the land. And what we mean by that is that you have to have a written rental agreement or some other agreement with the owner of the land that for the length of the EQIP contract. But you yourself do not have to own the land. If you do go into the EQIP program and you are implementing any of the conservation practices that have a lifespan greater than 1 year, then you have to have written consent from the owner of the property that they are okay and they agree to these conservation practices being put on the land. So some of our conservation practices that have 1 year, a 1 year lifespan are things like cover crop and mulch. You would not need the consent to get the consent of the landowner to do those conservation practices, but you would if you were doing a longer lifespan practice, something like a high tunnel or any of the irrigation practices. So if you're interested in the program, what are the next steps? Well, the first and best thing to do is to contact your local NRCS district conservationist. NRCS and Farm Service Agency have a service center office, or they have a service center that services every county in the state of Indiana. We may not physically have an office in that county, but there is staff that serves that county. So everyone is covered throughout the state of Indiana. There is a link here and a QR code to find your local service center. And that is a great place to start. Contact your district conservationist with NRCS. Let them know that you're interested in EQIP, and so that you guys can start that conversation. A quick note is that we have undergone a lot of staffing changes in the last few months. And if you go to this local service center link, it may not be accurate. So it may not be as up to date as these changes with our staff. Do start here. And if you're not able to contact, if you're not able to make that quick contact with that district conservationist serving your area, then we have our great partners who are hosting this call today with the Indiana Small Farm Conservation Program. So we've got Tanvi, Megan, Ellie, and Mike that are all here to help, and you can contact them and they can help connect you to that district conservationist that's serving your county. Here is a quick slide on a visual map of where our Indiana Small Farm Conservationists work and the areas that they cover. So you can see that they've got some pretty big areas, and there's a link to their website that you can find them at. Okay, so you've contacted your NRCS, or you're thinking about contacting your NRCS district conservationist or your small farm conservationist. Well, I'm here to tell you that the clock is ticking. We have a deadline for EQIP applications, and it's right around the corner. It's January 15th, 2026. So if you want to be considered for 2026 funding through EQIP, then the deadline for this batching period is January 15th, 2026. So please contact that local office as soon as you can, and they'll help get you started. If you are new to working with USDA NRCS, then a few things to know is you're going to need to contact, or you're going to need to establish farm records with the Farm Service Agency. Farm Service Agency is our sister agency, and they keep our records for us, our customer records for us. So the first thing that they'll have you do is establish as a customer with USDA. And the paperwork that you'll need to fill out for that really depends on if you're an individual or if you're applying as an entity. And so the best thing to do is to contact your local FSA with the service center locator. It's the same link and the same QR that was for NRCS offices. Find your local FSA office and make an appointment with them. Stopping in the office is great, but especially as we're in this time of holidays and we don't want you to walk into the office and there not be somebody there to service you that's available. There'll always be somebody at the office, but they do take appointments. A lot of offices take appointments. They don't do walk-ins, so do call them and make an appointment with them. So when you make that appointment, you can tell them about your operation, and they will tell you what documents you need to bring to establish as a customer. You'll also need to make sure that the land that you're operating has a farm and tract number. If it doesn't have a farm and tract number, then you would bring in a copy of the deed, and that is the way that you establish that farm and tract number. If you don't have a copy of the deed, then that can be found at the county recorder's or the county clerk's office. There's also some online services that I've used that you can get the deed right from your computer for a small fee. After the EQIP application is submitted, then you'll also need to fill out some eligibility documents. So that's that highly erodible land agreement that we talked about, as well as the wetland compliance. You'll also need to provide a direct deposit form because all of our payments are deposited directly into your account. We don't write checks anymore. Something that is important to know that a lot of times people aren't aware is that if you do go into a contract, into an EQIP contract, and you receive a payment for implementing a conservation practice, then at the end of the year, you will get a 1099. And so this is taxable income, and that is important to consider. So again, don't forget, we have that January 15th deadline that's right around the corner. You can put in your EQIP application. That form is called the CPA 1200, and it's available on the Indiana Small Farm Conservation Program Google Drive or on their website, which you all will have access to. The best way to get that document, though, is by contacting your local DC, letting them know that you're interested. They can help you fill out that form. They can get that form to you by mail, by stopping in the office, by email. So please do reach out to them. So once you have your application, you'll need to submit that. And you can do that in multiple different ways. You can do that by, again, if you're in the office, you can fill it out with the district conservationist. They'll walk you through that process. It literally just takes a few minutes. It's a 3-page application, and then they'll have it in hand. If you're not in office and you can mail it in the snail mail, or you can email it. You can email it by either scanning it or taking a picture with your phone, but there does need to be a physical signature and date on that application. So you can fill it out electronically, but then you do need to have it printed and signed and dated before you scan it or take a photo of it and email it. There is an electronic signature option through farmers.gov. We have the link here. If you visit farmers.gov, it's relatively simple to set up an account and submit your application that way. If you do any of the submitting of the application anyway, but dropping it physically off in the office, then please do contact your DC and make sure that they received your application. And Ellie is going to give us a little bit of information on and tell us about some of the upsides of applying for funding.
Thank you so much, Kara. And we thank you for those that have asked questions in the chat. We'll go ahead and regroup on those once we get to the end on the Q&A portion. So the upsides of applying, initially this can seem like a daunting process, and there are a lot of complicated aspects of it, but just to submit an application is relatively straightforward. And that starts that process off with having that relationship built with your district conservationist or our team, small farm conservation. And we want to think about that in the larger scale terms of, that relationship starts out with us being able to provide you with technical information, technical support, and do that conservation planning process along with you and your farm. And that's really the foundation of the NRCS's services, is to provide that conservation planning process and, think with you about all of the management practices that you are doing on your land for your operation, and how can we, reach those goals in a way that also conserves our natural resources. So that is a service that is a public good, and it is a public service that you are welcome to take advantage of. Yes, there are limitations and constraints on everybody's time and resources, that make it challenging to always meet those needs, to the highest potential that we would all love to. But just want that reminder to be there for you and for us is that applying also can be that kickstart of having that relationship and doing conservation planning. And there is a real benefit to that, regardless of what happens with funding, considerations with the EQIP process. So, long term, ideally, we would all be funded. All of the EQIP applications would get funded because, you have spent your time and energy and indicated your interest in doing these practices and would love to see that happen on your land and receive financial assistance for it. The good thing is that EQIP is funded on an annual basis, right? We have these dollars in place from the Farm Bill that producers of all scales are eligible to receive. I shouldn't say eligible. Those dollars are in play that small scale farms, if you meet those other eligibility aspects, are able to make use of. And at the same time, it is still competitive. So after going through the ranking process, unfortunately, there are farms that are not funded, not selected for funding every year. That happens no matter what scale you are. This is really, a process of ranking and looking at those resource concerns that are being addressed by the practices you wish to do on your farm. I really wanted to share about the benefit of just applying being a way to show you're there, speak your voice, say, hey, we are a very valuable part of our agricultural community in Indiana, and that you, by just the way of applying and going through the EQIP process, you demonstrate that there is an interest and a need in our state for conservation on the land and for financial assistance. And that is a benefit in and of itself. That data is looked at, by people that make decisions, and it's looked at, to advocate for future funding for these practices. And then the final point is just that applying does not mean that there is a contract in place yet. You are not tied to a particular dollar figure, or you are not tied to have to do that particular practice at that time of application. So it just starts the process, and then we can adjust things over time to make sure that you know what's entailed in doing that contract. Make sure you know the financial responsibilities. District conservationists can give a cost estimate for what you would anticipate receiving for doing these particular practices, and then what you will still be liable for. So there's multiple chances to adjust from the time of application. And even though there is this January 15th deadline for the next fiscal year for 2026, we really encourage you, if you're not sure yet, still apply and we'll see. Or, there are also multiple opportunities throughout this upcoming spring and summer to reach out and have us do that conservation planning process up front in preparation for an application next year. So it's always a good time to reach out. That's all for me. I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. I was just thinking, I didn't mention this. I've been saying the January 15th, 2026 deadline is coming, and that is true, but you can submit an application at any time. We take applications all year round. That January 15th deadline is to be considered for this batch of funding for 2026. So even if you come in on the 16th, you can still submit an application. And we can take that time to now put together a conservation plan for the next batch of funding. So even if you miss that 15th deadline, or you're not sure you want to put in an application, you can do that at any time. So what happens next? If you do put in an application, you are interested, then what happens next? Well, ideally, um, we would start with a conversation with the producer. Say that you're interested in just some cover crops on a very small area. You've been trying cover crops and over winter, and you want to find a cover crop to fit into a fallow time in your cropping system in the summer. So, and you don't need financial assistance. You just want some advice. Well, we can provide you with that technical assistance and get you that information. But maybe you do need financial assistance. Maybe there are more extensive practices that you're interested in. And we determine that a site visit is needed, that we can't just answer the questions in the office. And so the district conservationist would set up a time to meet with you and develop a conservation plan and submit that for EQIP. With our timing right now of right around the corner having this deadline come up, then that looks a little bit different. You may be submitting your application first, and then that process follows behind, and that's fine as well. But the basis of our conservation planning is that site visit. So the site visit is the best, right? It's an exciting time for you, and it's an exciting time for us because we get to walk the land with you and talk about what's going great, talk about your operation, what you've got going on, and then talk about the challenges and what you're struggling with. And we come up with a plan together to see if there are some conservation practices that can help those challenges and lessen them. It's also a really neat time to get someone out on your farm with totally fresh eyes, and they're looking at your operation through maybe a different lens than you have looked at it before. They're looking at it from the lens of conservation, and they may see things that you haven't thought of before. So, for example, you're walking along and you're on a road, and right now you've got your crop area, and you'd love some privacy from that road, and that can be looked at through that conservation lens of, hey, have you ever thought of doing a hedgerow between the cropland and the road to provide you a little bit of privacy, but also to provide some beneficial insect habitat and some pollinator habitat, some wildlife habitat. So that's an example of just looking at your operation in a little bit of a different way. And then from there, it is a conversation. So the conservationist who's out there with NRCS or with Indiana Small Farm, if it's an Indiana Small Farm conservationist, a soil and water partner, whoever the conservationist is out there, then that becomes a conversation of, well, there's all these opportunities to improve the natural resources, but here's my priorities as the grower. Here's what's really I'd love to do it all, but here's my priorities. And so you decide together what you'd like to put into a conservation plan and submit for funding for an application. Some of the things that you can do as the grower when somebody is coming out for a site visit to make things go smoothly and make it the most efficient use of your time is to have your fields or your growing areas named, to know the size of them. If you're growing in beds, to know the width of your bed, the length of your bed, how many beds that you have in each growing area, and to really do some serious thinking about what your goals are. not just what's available through us, but what would you like to improve? Maybe you know that you have compaction and that's a goal. Then sharing that with us can help us get to those conservation practice options faster. Other things to think about are as if you have non-production areas. So some maybe side areas. What are you doing with those? Are you interested in maybe doing some wildlife habitat there? What are your plans for them? Do you have recent soil tests or do you have a crop rotation plan? Share those with the conservationists, and that can all be great information on finding the best plan for you. And then, yeah, we create that draft plan. Once that's kind of a give, that's kind of a back and forth process of, hey, the conservationist may send you a draft plan and it has 6 items in it. And you look at it and say, you know, this looks really great, but I think I'm right now really only interested in doing 4 of these practices. I want to think about those other 2 for later on, and that's fine. That is what that's what that process is all about. So after we have the draft conservation plan together, then we take your plan and we put it into our system called Conservation Desktop. We assess the resource, we assess what conservation you're doing, what your resource concerns are, and what practices you plan to do. That assessment helps us come up with a ranking. So every application is scored. It's given a ranking number, and that is based on, like I said, it's based on what you're already doing, what your resource concerns are, where you're geographically located, and it generates that score. The district conservationist will also put together a payment estimate, or the conservationist. Sorry, I keep saying district conservationist, but I mean conservationist, any of the conservationists that are working with you. They'll put together a payment estimate. And remember, I talked about the flat rate funding. So once we receive our payment scenarios for each of the practices, which we haven't received yet for fiscal year 26. But once we do, then we can determine how much we will reimburse you for each of the practices that you have scheduled based on the amount that you're doing, and put together that payment estimate. The payment estimate is really important because it helps you as a grower to know what your out-of-pocket expenses might be. So say for a high tunnel, you're going to get, the payment estimate is that you're going to get $10,000 for this high tunnel. You can then go and price different high tunnels that you're interested in, different models, different companies, different build options, if you're going to do it yourself or if you're going to pay someone, and get an idea of what your out-of-pocket expense can be. And that can help determine if you want to go forward with your application. Once your application is, once it's finalized and assessed and ranked and submitted, then it is locked in. So at that point, we cannot change the application to add a practice or to subtract a practice without it changing the whole ranking. And so it's kind of locked in at that point. So up until this point, it hasn't been locked in. You could add or subtract practices. Once it's locked in, then we will take the highest ranked application in a fund pool. The highest score in that fund pool will pre-approve that application and go down the list based on the scores until either all of the applications are selected down to the minimum floor of the score that we've set for that year, or we ran out of money. At that point, someone will contact you and let you know, hey, your EQIP application was pre-approved for funding. And you can decide at that point if you want to continue on or if you don't want to continue on. So everything up to this point, you are not obligated. You can back out and say, I've changed my mind, no problem whatsoever. But if you do decide to continue, then we'll put together practice implementation documents, and that details exactly what you're going to need to do to implement each of the conservation practices that are in that application. The conservationists will go over those documents with you to make sure that you understand what you're required to do. If everything looks good, the NRCS will generate a contract, a legally binding contract, and you will sign that. Once the contract is signed, submitted, and funds are obligated to that contract, then you're ready to start your practices. And you can get going with putting them on your land. So what happens if you don't get selected for funding? Like Ellie mentioned, we would love for everyone to get selected for funding, but that doesn't always happen because funds are limited. Then you have a couple of different options. You can choose to roll over your application to the next batching period or the next fiscal year, whichever comes first, or you can decline and say, you know, I don't think I want to go ahead with continuing to seek funds for this. So that's your choice. If you do choose to roll over your application, then this is a great opportunity to work with your conservationist to see if there might be a way to strengthen your application. A great example of this is, say that, you know, you put together with your conservationist a draft conservation plan and you just selected the high tunnel. So say there were, you know, 6 practices in there and you just selected the high tunnel because that's the priority for your farm. And then you didn't get selected for funding. Well, this could be a good opportunity to take a look at some of those other practices and say, you know, actually, I really do want to do cover crops. I think that could work for our farm, and you will be addressing more resource concerns, and your application will be ranked higher. It'll be given a higher score, and you're more likely to get funded for the next round of funding. Okay, so I know that there's been some questions that have been popping in the chat. That is all that I had to cover. So if we can go through some of those questions, that would be great. How's it looking, Tanvi?
It's looking great. We're so happy to have everyone participating and getting some really, really good questions and even some scenarios on here.
Great.
Yeah, I just keep on posting on them if anyone has any more. We have a question by Jade. JD, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I apologize. So does shifting from one crop type to another impact eligibility? For example, growing veggies then changing to flowers, or would that depend on crops' impact on production methods?
Great question. We consider all crops cropland. So you could be growing, like the example that you were given, the veggies to flowers to perennial herbs. These are all crops. And so no, we would not view that as changing. It's not changing a land use. It's still cropland. the example that I gave was that if you had like say a fallow area that has not been in production, that's permanent vegetation, that say you're just bush hogging once a year and you're wanting to bring that into cropland, then that's where we don't help expand into that area. Another really good example would be, say that you have a forest land and it's just a small little forest land area and you want to clear that to bring it into cropland production and do a high tunnel there. Then we would not help put the high tunnel there.
Thank you. And if you want any more questions, have follow-up to any questions, yeah, post them on the chat. And another question is, what if two farms operate on one parcel of land? Can each farm apply for EQIP, or is it just per parcel of land?
I think we're probably going to have to we'll have to contact programs and ask them that very specific question, because we don't want to give you the wrong information. That kind of gets into the nuances. So excellent question, but we'll have to get back with you on that one.
Okay, great. I'm looking down. Let's see. Sorry, just one second. Okay. Can you explain the ranking system a little bit?
Sure. So EQIP specifically is designed to improve natural resources when there's a concern. So it's a little counterintuitive, but the more concerns that you have and that you're addressing, that you're improving through the program, then the higher your application will rank. So we have another program called Conservation Stewardship Program that we haven't talked about in this meeting because this is really an EQIP forward meeting that is the exact flip of that, where the more natural resources that you are addressing or that you're meeting our criteria for addressing at time of application, the higher rank that application will be. That score that I talked about that's generated for EQIP, it takes into account multiple different factors. So the resource concerns that you have, the conservation practices that you're doing to address those. There's also the locality of your area. If you have threatened and endangered species nearby and you're doing a practice that's going to help them. If you're in a drinking water area and you're doing water quality practices that are going to improve water quality. And then something that I didn't mention is we also have our local priorities. So there is a local working group that is hosted by the county's Soil and Water Conservation District that happens every year. And that's an opportunity from the county stakeholders to come together and rank from 1 to 10 their most important natural resources for their county. And that's prioritized. So say that we're in Marion County and our number one priority is soil erosion. Then if you're putting in an EQIP application that is doing conservation practices that improve soil erosion, then because soil erosion is ranked number one from your local working group, then that will receive points and so on and so forth on those 10 that are ranked.
Thanks for covering that. Yeah, we have a lot of questions about like how, how ranking is affected given different circumstances. So those are for those of you who are asking about the ranking questions, those are more specific, and that's what the district conservationist can help you answer, given whatever your specific context is.
And can I just, Tanvi, can I just talk a little bit about maybe an application that, say, has been submitted for just a high tunnel? I know I talked about that before, where there's room for strengthening the application. I use that as an example. Is if we think about a high tunnel, then and resource concerns. So remember, our resource concerns are soil, water, air, plants, animals, humans, energy. A high tunnel, what it does is it extends our growing season and improves the productivity of our plants. And so that one conservation practice addresses and improves one resource concern, which is our plants. If we are doing cover crops, then cover crops can improve a whole suite of soil quality natural resources. So it can reduce compaction, increase organic matter, increase aggregate stability for water being able to get into the ground, can reduce soil erosion, increase air quality because you have something growing during an area where or during a time of year when something normally wouldn't be growing. So it addresses multiple different resource concerns. So you can see how in the ranking, if you're just doing a high tunnel, how that might, depending on where you're located, it might rank pretty dang low versus if you're doing a high tunnel and cover crops. So now you're not just improving plants, you're improving soil, water, air. So hopefully that is a good example of showing how to improve or to strengthen your ranking by addressing more resource concerns through conservation practices. I'm just looking at the tail end of this chat. I haven't been keeping up with it because I cannot multitask like that. So I'm so thankful for TNV. But I see that can you post the resource concerns? That is a really excellent suggestion. And it's pretty eye-opening to see those. So we'll make sure that we get those accessible.
Yep, I was talking without mute, with the mute on, so
Oh,
sorry. Another question from Juan is, are there any penalties if for some reason the contract is not fulfilled?
Hi, Juan Carlos. Yeah, potentially. There can potentially be penalties if the contract's not fulfilled. It depends on why the contract isn't being fulfilled. If there is some sort of hardship, then you can request a cancellation of that contract and without penalties. So it just depends on your specific situation.
Um, and then something I just want to put up here, and feel free to either just say, yep, that's right, or edit it as needed. Bonnie asked, does veteran status impact your rating? And Jamie responded, you can qualify for advance or higher payments if you were honorably discharged in the last 10 years. You can also get this payment as a new farmer if you're 10 or years less new. If you qualify as low income or minority, it's all the same fund pool called historically underserved status. Any changes to that?
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you, Jamie. And if you follow that link, it kind of goes into, like Jamie was saying, for the beginning farmer, historically underserved, that 10-year requirement of less than 10 years of operating a farm. that site, that link to that site goes into detail, more detail and nuances of each of those categories.
That's all of the kind of nuanced and specific questions.
TNV, I see this is a really good point is I bet this is Megan posting this on Urban Soil Health. If a producer has done EQIP in the past and they're interested in funding for this next fiscal year, do they have to reapply? Yes. So just because you're a customer, you have a farm and track number, you have an active EQIP contract, if you're interested in doing more practices that aren't in contract, yes, you do have to reapply, or you do have to apply for this batching period. Thank you so much. I meant to cover that in the presentation and I didn't, so thanks for that prompt.
Just jumping in, I do see one more question, which was about can you be involved with EQIP and WIP or CRP if the payment is not for the same practice?
Let me find that and read that.
Yeah, 218 from Bryant.
Got it. Yep. Hmm. If land is in CRP, so if land is coming out of CRP, so land is expiring, it's in CRP and it's expiring, then you can apply for EQIP. But if it is in CRP currently, then no, it is already in a conservation program, and so you would not be able to apply for EQIP on that land. Sorry, it took me a moment to find that and then a moment to think about it. I hope that's clear.
Yep, and I think another question from the same person, does having your property next to a bog or nature preserve improve your rating?
It depends on what your existing resource concerns are and what conservation practices you're applying for. So that will come up as like say that it's a nature preserve, a bog that's in a nature preserve. If you are doing a water quality, the one that comes to my mind immediately would be if you were doing a water quality practice, then yes, that would improve your score. Our program that we assess the applications through, it has layers. It's a GIS system and it has layers. So it has a layer that has natural areas, preserves, etc.
And then something that I wanted to just reiterate is that we'll be posting a video of this presentation or the recording on our Indiana Small Farms Conservation.org website. So Megan put the link on that on our website on here. It's right in the middle of this slide that's up. So we'll be posting a video of it on here. And for those agriculture professionals who want to share this presentation with your fellow county members, you can feel free to reach out and email us and we'll get that copy to you so that you can use it, edit it.
I see a question from Juan Carlos on if a person has already had an EQIP application or contract and wants to farm on another piece of land, can he or she apply? Absolutely. We have people do that. Yeah, that is not uncommon. So yes, absolutely. And then Bonnie, I am so sorry that you are having some overspray issues, and wholeheartedly agree with Megan that a windbreak, hedgerow, something to block that area that the spray is coming from is an excellent suggestion.
Yeah, we're getting some great kind of back and forth between professionals and farmers, so that's really nice to hear.
Yeah, we've got
Um,
a lot of really talented people on this team. So thank you all.
from Jody for EQIP, a minimum requirement for a small farm's um, ag has to be more than 900K. Is that a question? Sorry, that's supposed to
No,
be.
no, Jody, if you have an AGI of more than 900,000, you're not eligible for EQIP. So kind of opposite of what you're thinking. Yeah, like Megan said in her response, but just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Mhm. How do small farmers apply not meeting that requirement? Or maybe that
Oh,
was an extension. Yeah.
oh, yes. So with the Farm Service Agency, when you establish as a customer, and then complete that eligibility document, they have a form where it's probably the easiest form that you will fill out, where you mark that your AGI is either more than 900,000 or you mark that it's less than 900,000. They send that to IRS for verification, and that they get an email back from IRS that it's verified, and that's all you need to do. So it's nice. You don't have to submit your previous tax returns or anything like that. Pretty simple. And I'm really sorry if I said earlier that you have to have more than 900,000. I see a comment in there that I may have misspoke, which I do sometimes. So I apologize if I did that.
We can still give a couple more minutes for any last questions, but again, with the resources here, the Google Drive folder link, that will have all of the presentation slides. It also right now has the EQIP application that's correct for this fiscal year. So find it there or scroll back to the live links earlier in these presentation slides to find it. Farmers.gov, again, your local district conservationist. And there's also the top 10 practices document, which goes over, just those top 10. And then the recording we'll post on YouTube. I'll try to get that up today, if not tomorrow. And you'll still see urban soil health on some of our publications. We're still going through this transition, but just know that it's the same team. Indiana Small Farms Conservation is our new name. Urban soil health, you'll find the same group of people. And this website has our team. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Just really appreciate you all being here. Oh, and of course, I had one last slide with our contact information or direct emails. So if you have any feedback for us or direct requests, again, to go into any more detail about your specific farms, I know some in the chat have, would love to hear more about your farms and set up a site visit and get to meet you and understand your operations.
Thank you all for such excellent questions, and yes, for joining us today, your interest in conservation, and thanks so much for this great team that we have.
Thank you all.